Welcome to this week's homework. Today what we'll be doing is looking at applying some relative valuation models to valuing H&M as the example. In front of you, you see the worksheet that you can download off iLearn, and what you see is a quite simple spreadsheet. So at the very top, you see some information about certain companies that I'm using as my comparable firms. These are exactly the same firms that I use when I estimate my, comparable firm beta. So for each firm, what we need to do is we need to figure out some key inputs, such as its equity value and some key financial figures. The three ones I've chosen for this example is sales, net profit, and book value. And you'll see that there's a heading here that says TTM, and that means trailing 12 months. So because we're kind of doing this valuation historically, so in this case, I'm assuming I'm valuing the H&M at the time of its year-end date in 2015, because that's the last financial year I had available at the start of the semester. And that financial year, in that case, ended on, I think it was the 30th of November 2015. So trailing 12 months just means that I want to get basically as close to possible at matching those figures. For example, if Zara has a year-end date in mid-June, to get the trailing 12 months, I would try to find the quarter that best matches the H&M year-end date of 30th November 2015, and then go 4 quarters back and sum them up. But I'll give you guys an example to see how it works. Well, effectively what we'll be doing is we'll be calculating a number of multiples in this section. We'll be looking at, for example, in this cell, we'll be calculating the multiple of equity value divided by sales to get the multiple of, at which sales are valued at. Based on these multiples that we calculate for each and every company, we can then go into the next section where we'll be calculating and estimating the minimum, the maximum, the mean, and the median multiple from our sample of 5 firms. Based on these multiples, we can then apply to H&M's case. So here in this row, we'll be inputting the number for sales for H&M. Then we're going to input the number for net profit and book value, and also the amount of shares that they have. And by combining the average, minimum, maximum, median multiple with H&M's own information, we can then estimate the value per share for H&M. So in this case, I've already pre-filled the information for 3 companies because most of the work that you'll be doing this week is just going on Bloomberg and getting in the information. And to avoid the repetition, I'm just going to give you 2 examples. So the first example I'm going to be doing is Zara. So what I need to do is I need to get these 4 figures for Zara. So I need to get the equity value, the sales, the net profit, and the book value for Zara. Now you will notice that in the reading and in the lecture, we talked usually about earnings per share, and we talked about price multiples. In this case, I'm just stating it in the overall equity value. So if you want to get the price per share, you divide this equity value by numbers of shares outstanding. Or when it comes to earnings per share, well, you would take that net profit and divide it by the shares outstanding. In this case, I'm just expressing it in their absolute numbers. So again, let's just go into Bloomberg and see how we can get this these 4 figures for Zara. So let's see. So in this case, I already have Zara open, and this is kind of the first screen that you see once you've selected the company. All the figures that you'll need will be found under financial analysis, so the FA function. So what I'm interested in is, again, I'm trying to match up the year-end date with H&M. So in this case, I can see that Zara's financial year ends on, 31st of January, whereas H&M's ends on the 30th of November. So I can't necessarily just use, for example, the market capitalization, or in other words, the equity value for this figure, because it's not going to match up with the year-end date of H&M. So what I need to do instead is effectively calculate the trailing 12 months for Zara by changing the periodicity to quarters. So if I change that to quarters, I then get quarterly information for Zara. And if I just scroll to the left a bit, I can see that, for example, One of the quarters, so quarter 3, 2016, ended on the 31st of October 2015. Again, it's not exact match of 30th November, but it's close enough. So that's probably the closest one I'll get. So what I need to do first is I need to grab the equity value. In this case, the equity value is exactly the same as the market capitalization. I can just right click on it and click copy, so it's not too difficult. I then go into my Excel spreadsheet and I can just paste it into the equity value section. I then need to get sales, net profit, and book value, and these are slightly trickier, specifically when it comes to sales and net profit. So again, these are quarterly figures, but what I'm trying to get is the trailing 12 months that ends on the 31st of October 2015. That means I effectively need to sum up the values for the revenues or sales for the last 4 quarters. What you can do, again, you can do this manually, but if you just left click and then just highlight these 4 cells and just let go of your mouse, it would have automatically been copied over into the clipboard, meaning that if I go to the right hand side here where I have some empty space and I paste it, I actually see the numbers in front of me. Again, what we want to do is we effectively want to sum these up. And if you actually go to the right hand corner in Excel, it actually counts the average, the amount of, cells you have. So in this case 4, and the sum of these cells. So the sum of these cells is 20,151.5. So again, you can sum it up by using a formula. I usually just go down here to see what it actually is. So 20,151.5. So 20,151.5. The next figure is net profit, and again I go back to Bloomberg. Net profit and net income are exactly the same thing, so in this case I'm just going to highlight the last 4 quarters. Paste it and go down and I see it's 2877.7. So 2877.7. The final figure I need is book value, and book values are easy because they're just snapshots in time, so we don't need to sum up quarters, we just need to look at the matching quarter. So we're instead in quarter 3 2016. If I go down to the book value, or in other words the total equity for the firm, I can see that it's 10,692. So 10,692. And that's it. The last company we're going to be using as the example is Esprit, and Esprit I'm using as a second example because it's slightly trickier. So if I want, for example, switch to Esprit, I can just type in Esprit. It's called 330HK Equity in this case. I click on that, and again I go into financial analysis. The reason I'm showing this as an example is because that when you guys might do this for your own company, it might, have kind of similar issues. So here I can see that Esprit's financial year ends in June 30th, which is not necessarily that good for me. So what I want to do is, again, I wanted to change to quarters because that's what I usually do. But then something funny happens and you can see that I only have 2 quarters of information back 2013, 2014. The reason is because Esprit is listed on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. They only need to report semi-annual and annual information. So in Esprit's case, the best we can get is semi-annual. So if I change it to semi-annuals, then I'll start to see slightly more information. And then if I kind of look through the semi-annual or the kind of every 6-month reporting, I can see that one of them ends on, 31st of December 2015, which is I guess about a month after H&M. So in this case, again, good enough. It's not a perfect match, but that's all right. So again, we're going to be using the market capitalization from this figure. And we don't, sum these up because the market capitalization is effectively the market value of the firm by the share price. So you don't need to sum it up because it's an absolute figure in this case. So paste it in. Then we need to get sales, and again, sales, we just go to the revenue, but again, because we only have 2, periods for 2000, per year, we only need to sum up the 2 last periods to get the trailing 12 months worth of sales. So it's $18,020. So 18,020. The net profit, on the other hand, if we sum these up, let's see what happens. It's negative 1775.8. So negative 1775.8. And then finally, the book value, if we go into the balance sheet section, scroll down, and let's see if we can find total equity. Total equity is 11,228. In this case, I only need it from that cell, so I'm just going to right click and click copy. And that's effectively it. So now we have all the information, and what you'll see is that technically net profit for Esprit is negative, and this is going to cause some issues that we need to deal with later on. So what we can start doing now is calculating some multiples. So to calculate a multiple, all you do is effectively just follow what this kind of cell suggests. So it's equity value divided by sales in this cell, equity value divided by net profit in this cell, and by book value in this cell. So in this case, let's take equity value. So in our case, it's in C5, and we want to divide it by sales, which is in D5. Again, we can, because we have sales, net profit, and book value in exactly the same order across these three columns, we can just lock the column for C5. So we put a $sign in front of C, so we can drag it to the right. So that gives us a multiple of 5.26, well, 6879. So what we can do now is we can essentially just drag it to the right, and if I go to the rightmost cell, I can see that yes, it's taken the equity value and divided it by book value, so it all seems to have been done correctly. I can do similarly, I can just drag it downwards, and it will calculate the multiples for the other companies. Now, because this is a bit hard to read, what I can do is what we usually do in finance is we format multiple cells by using a custom formatting. So if I right click and choose format cells, right now it's formatted as a general. What I want to do is I just want to format it as custom, and I might use a, let's see, a template, so 0.0, and I'm just going to replace that last 0 with an X. So what this tells me is that it's going to give me the number to one decimal point, and at the end it's going to add an X, which to me indicates that it's going to be a multiple. So click OK, and now it's a lot easier to read. So for example, I know that H&M, or in this case Zara, is valued at 5.3 times its sales, or 36.9 times its net profit, and so on. The next section that we'll be doing is we're going to be filling out the kind of minimum, maximum, mean, and median values for our firms up here. So for example, in this cell, we want to find what is the minimum value. So in this case, we'll use the MIN, or minimum, function in Excel. So MIN, and then I just highlight the range, close the bracket, and it tells me that the minimum value is 0.7. And again, if I go up here, I can see that yes, it is 0.7 for GAAP. Again, just drag it to the right, and you get the same thing for all the other firms. Also for all the other, I guess, multiples. For maximum, it's the MAX function. So similarly, again, we just highlight, close bracket. For mean, it's the average function. Close bracket. And for median, it is the median function. So median, open up a bracket, highlight the cells, close bracket, and that's it. And again, if I go to the right, drag it to the right, and I get this kind of a, I guess, automatic filling. So now I have my kind of minimum, my maximum, my mean, and my median multiples. Usually we would mostly focus on the mean multiples, because that will tell me that on average, firms that are comparable to mine are valued at 2.3 times their sales, or 21.8 times their net profit. But you also want the information about the minimum, maximum, and the median, just to give an idea about the range in your valuation. Because again, when we do valuations, it's very rarely that we are exactly precisely sure that it's exactly this value. Well, that might be our best guess, but there's a range and a confidence interval around that. So to apply these multiples to H&M's case, we need to get the information for H&M for sales, net profit, and book value. Now in this case, because I'm valuing H&M at the end of their financial year, their trailing 12 months is effectively what they, I guess, reported for 2015. So in my case, it's quite easy. In your case, for your project company, it might not be that easy. So usually you might have to actually go and find the quarterly information and sum it up. So for sales, I'm going to use equal. I'm going to go to the, let's see, well, technically if I go to the forecasting sheet, I know it's nicely presented for me because I've already organized that in the past week. So sales in 2015 were 180,861. So cell G16. Press enter. For net profit, similarly, I'll just go to forecasting, column G, in this case, cell G26. And book value, again, equal to, I'll go to the forecasting week. In the forecasting week, there's a total equity section on, let's see, row 31. So G31 is the cell that I want to get. And this gives me that information. The next piece of information that I'll need is the number of shares that H&M has. And the reason for that is because down here, I want to estimate a minimum, maximum, mean, and median value per share if I apply these multiples to H&M. And in order to do that, I need to get the number of shares outstanding. Again, you can get the number of shares outstanding from multiple places because we used it in a quite few different areas. So I know that in last week, we used it for the DCF. So in the discounted cash flow analysis on, let's say, I-25, I already referenced the shares outstanding from somewhere else in the balance sheet, I think. Press enter, and I now have the number of shares outstanding. Technically, I can drag it to the right. It's going to be I can't necessarily. I need to lock it first. But again, it's going to be exactly the same for each year. So if I were to lock this cell by pressing F4, or lock the reference, drag it to the right, and I have the number of shares for each one of these. So now what I need to do is I need to calculate the minimum value, the maximum value, the mean value, and the median value per share if we apply these multiples to H&M's case. So in this case, what we can do is, again, start with an equal sign, and I want to use this multiple, so this minimum multiple, and multiply it by H&M's trailing 12 months for sales. And I technically should have this multiplication, so G11 multiplied by G16 within a bracket. And I want to divide it by the numbers of shares outstanding. And furthermore, since we can probably just drag it to the right and left, we just need to make sure that we lock a few different cells. So what we want to do is we want to lock in this case, we want to lock the row number for G16. So in front of the 16, I'm going to put in a $sign, because if I want to drag it downwards, I want to make sure that it keeps it on this row because we only have the information on this row. I don't want to lock the column because if I drag it to the right, it can then reference the net profit and the book value multiples for me. Then we have the shares outstanding, and again, I can just do exactly the same thing. I can just lock the row number by putting the $sign in front of 17. Press enter, and we get a minimum value per share if we use a sales multiple of 74.55. Drag it downwards, and we get the maximum, the mean, and the median. And if you drag it to the right, then you get the information for the net profit multiple, or I guess PE multiple, and the book value multiple. And again, if we look at the averages, they're actually pretty comparable. However, there's one last thing that you kind of need to do, and that's just to look for any weird inputs. So in this case, if you were to look at these multiples, try to find any negative multiple. And in this case, I know that the multiple for Esprit is negative. Whenever you have a negative multiple, you can just type in, override it by typing in NA, which is not applicable. And what happens then is that all your minimum, maximum, mean, and median numbers get updated because this multiple is no longer valid. So because it's a negative multiple, it doesn't provide us with any form of information. After that adjustment, I can see that the net profit, multiple has increased because we used to have a negative number there, and now because we removed it, the average has increased. So again, if we look at this range of, valuations, we can see that it ranges from $232 to $374 per share, depending on which multiple we use. We also see that within each multiple, there's quite a large range. So for example, if you use a net profit multiple, it ranges from $127 per share to $629 per share. And that's effectively it for this week.